Hey everybody, this is Tony Hollowitz from the John Anthony Group, and I want to thank you for being here today. It is greatly appreciated. The class today is going to be in QuickBooks, and one of the things that I always tell people about QuickBooks is that we have the great ability with QuickBooks to do a lot of things that you can learn on your own. What my experience has been is when you use QuickBooks, you just need a little bit of a push in the right direction. QuickBooks you learn by doing, and I can always appreciate what people have to go through to get into QuickBooks. The thing I want to say about QuickBooks is don't be intimidated by it, because it really comes easily if you just take a little bit of time and practice, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So today, before we get going, there's just a few things I want to go over quickly about this class today. This is a class that is going to be 90 minutes long in length. We've left some time at the far end to answer questions, and one of our focuses will be to try to make this as good a class in this period of time. Now, I do have a lot of people that say to me, geez, you know what, are we going to be able to get all that information in a couple hours or an hour and a half? And again, one of the things I tell people is when you use QuickBooks, what you really have to do is go into QuickBooks and practice. And you'll see that as we get into it a little bit more. So before we get going, I just want to go over a couple things that will make you aware of what's going on in today's class. We are using a piece of software called GoToWebinar. And with GoToWebinar, you have the ability to ask me questions by sending me questions. Right down in this area, right here, you're going to see you can type in a question right in this little white area and then hit send. That will get over to me. I'll see that a question has come in, but once you've done that, I might not respond to it right away. What I'll try to do is incorporate that into the training, and I'll also pause periodically to look at the questions and just make sure that I'm answering your questions as they come in. And again, towards the end of the training, what we'll do is we'll back up and answer any of your questions at that time as well. So I do get your questions. I try to incorporate them in the training. If they're going to be addressed a little bit later, I might not get right to them, but I am seeing them, and just be aware of that. What to expect today? Well, we will take a break, a 2-minute break after about 35 minutes. Then we'll take another break after about another 35 minutes. It might be a little bit longer, but just during the training, because it is a little bit long, it can get a little intense just because you're trying to concentrate on this stuff. What I do recommend, just get up, stretch the legs, relax a little bit, and that gives me a couple minutes to review my notes and make sure I'm hitting all the key points. The training will, go in increments. If you have any questions, I can also reverse the screen. So if you have QuickBooks open on your end and I'm not quite getting the idea of your question, I can reverse the screen so that everyone in the class would see your screen. Now, I can't do that without your permission, but it is doable. Just be aware of that. And again, I'll try to do that kind of thing towards the end of the training. Want to just thank you for attending today. We will get right into QuickBooks. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'd be more than happy to try to help you out. Now, one of the things I want to say before we get right into QuickBooks is my approach to training. When I train, what I try to do is I try to set up a scenario where you're not going to remember every little thing I do. It's just not going to happen. But one of the advantages of you being a subscriber to these classes is simply the fact that we record these classes. So because we record them, what we do is we will put them up on the web so you can come back and listen to them again. In this particular class, we're going to break down into segments. We're going to break it down into smaller segments that will be approximately 20 to 30 minutes each. So this recording session will occur in small increments so you can come back in and review it. That's what I recommend. Get into QuickBooks. Don't be afraid of it. The one thing I always tell people about QuickBooks is if you make a mistake doing something, you're going to catch it when you go back in on a monthly basis to reconcile, for example, your checking account or checking accounts. So don't be afraid of QuickBooks at all. To show you QuickBooks, I'm going to come down and I'm going to hit the little window logo key on my keyboard. It's down by the control key down on the bottom left, and it just gives me some options. I'm going to click on QuickBooks, which I've already opened. For those of you that are already using QuickBooks, what I want you to be aware of is the fact that what you're seeing on my screen is probably different than what you normally see on your screen. There are all kinds of different versions of QuickBooks. There's the one I'm using right now to draw your attention up top is QuickBooks Pro 2006. There's actually another version. But one of the pet peeves I have with software companies is that you can only change the wheel so many times. And software to a certain degree does that. Now, yeah, they update it, they make it a little bit easier to use with some of the other technologies that are out there, but the basic fundamentals are the same. What changes is in essence what you see on the screen. I always liken it to driving a car when you buy a new car. Yeah, you know how to run the heating system, you know how to turn on the air conditioning, but when you get in that new car, the buttons are just in different spots, and it takes you a little while to get used to it. For the most part, regardless of the version of QuickBooks you have, we can teach you how to use QuickBooks by showing you our version. You're going to be able to figure out your version. There's going to be subtle differences, but for the most part, you're going to figure it out. If you do need help after this training, we can help you in individualized training sessions. We can do one-on-one training using a service called Go to My PC, which is a great tool. It allows us to log into your computer remotely, with your permission, of course. You can invite us to your computer, and we can help you one-on-one. So what we're going to try to do today is give you an overview, and to a certain degree, I'm going to make some sweeping generalizations. In other words, because we have a diverse class, different types of businesses, I'm not going to get specific. Sometimes I can't answer exact or specific questions, but I'll do my best to try to help you. So again, we can do consulting with you remotely anywhere in the world using GoToMyPC via appointment, and that's usually a good way to do it. If you're trying to get over a hurdle, just trying to get to a point where you're like, wait a minute, how did he do that again? Obviously, you can come in and listen to the recordings, but time-wise, it might be better for you to consider working with us one-on-one. So, what you're seeing right here in QuickBooks is simply what they refer to as their home page. It's a home page that allows you to get to a lot of different areas. To be honest with you, I typically don't use this. There's nothing wrong with this. It's just when I learned QuickBooks, they didn't have this option. I learned on older versions. They also have up here different icons that you can get to, and you can customize these icons to use the things that you do on a daily basis. So for example, probably one of the most key things you can do when you're in business is create an invoice. So let me just create a scenario for you. When you're in QuickBooks, and you're working within QuickBooks, and assuming you're in business, well, your goal is to find customers and ultimately be able to bill your customers. So what you need to do is you need to create an invoice. So let's say, for example, that we want to create our first invoice, and I think this is a great place in QuickBooks to start because it's a great place for most businesses to start. When you're using QuickBooks, you learn by doing, and you enter things by doing. Some people like to go in and get a lot of data in there in advance. I don't recommend that. You know, if you feel you must do that, by all means go ahead. But one of the greatest fundamentals in business is sending an invoice. So let's send an invoice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make up a company. I'm going to call it RRR Painting Company. Let's say we did some work for RRR Painting Company, and just for the sake of our discussion, let's say that we're selling widgets. Now, you'll notice that right up here, I'm going to type in RRR Painting Company. Now, I'm going to use the Tab key to move ahead. In QuickBooks, you can use the pointer, you can use the mouse, but you don't have to, because everything you can do in QuickBooks, you can do with the Tab key or keyboard shortcuts. So when we get into QuickBooks, we went right in and started an invoice. I typed in RR Painting Company, our newest first client. I'm going to hit the Tab key to move on. Now, what happens here, and what will happen throughout QuickBooks, is when you're working in QuickBooks and you enter something that's never been put in there, you will be asked to add it. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. What I'm going to recommend you do initially is just what's called a quick add. And I want to draw your attention right here to where it says quick add. You'll notice that around this box it's highlighted in blue. Well, what that means is that if you want to do a quick add, all you have to do is hit the enter key. Now, what quick add did is simply took this name up here and put it down there. If I had done a little more of a custom, I could have gone in and put greater detail into this. You can do that, but for right now I'm not going to show you how to do that. Now, when I hit the tab key, it actually came over here to customize. I'm going to hit it again, and down here are different invoices. You can customize an invoice in QuickBooks to suit your needs. For example, you could put your company logo on it. Again, there's some things that I will not get into in great detail in this class because there are some things that I think are better suited for you to ask me specific questions. As our training goes along, we're going to put little tutorials in on how to do these things so you can refer to them in our online training section. And it's not just related to QuickBooks, but our online training refers to a lot of different things as well. So for now, I'm just going to hit the tab key, get away from that, and I want you to observe that the next field it went to was the date. And by default, what it does is it puts in today's date. Today is the 14th of September. I'm going to hit the tab key again, and now it's going to go to invoice. Now, what typically happens when I start working with a company is if you just opened and created QuickBooks or an account in QuickBooks, we would have seen the first invoice number be the number 1. Well, a lot of times people don't want to convey that this is their first invoice. So what you can do is whatever invoice number you wanted to start with, say it be 5,000, well, if you type in 5,000 in the invoice number, QuickBooks will start numbering your invoices automatically from that point forward. So the next time you create an invoice, it'll be 5001, 5002, so on and so forth. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you choose an invoice number. And if you forget on the first one, just on the second one, go in and create it, because it will go like 1. And then if you forgot, go in and make it 5,000. And the next one will be 5,000, then 5,001, and so forth. So I'm going to leave it at 503. I'm going to hit the tab number. Now, down here where it put RRR Painting Company, at this point I'm going to hit the enter key, and I'm going to type in a little bit more detail here. I'm just going to type in 123 State Street. And notice my blazing typing speed. It's sort of ironic that although I'm in this business, I'm not a very good typist. And I'm going to just type in Boston, Mass, because we're right outside of Boston. And I'm going to just throw in a zip code. And I'm not sure if this is an accurate zip code. I'm going to hit the tab key and move on. Now, the tab key, sometimes you got to watch where it jumps around to, but it went down here to PO number. Keep in mind there's all kinds of different fields here on the invoice, and you can customize this. The invoice might have, for example, you could put a box here for sales reps. So if you have 5 sales reps and you want to keep track of who the sales rep is on this invoice, you can add a box called sales rep. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to hit terms, and what I'm going to do is just to illustrate a point, I'm going to come in here and type in the terms ZZZ. Now that doesn't make sense, but I'm just typing in terms that will show you the next point. I'm going to hit the tab key. Now, ZZZ is not on the terms list, meaning anytime I add something new in QuickBooks in any of these fields, the very first time I put it in, I'm prompted to add some more information. So for example, if I come up and click on Setup, or because it's highlighted in blue, I can just hit the Enter key on my keyboard. Now I'm going to be prompted to put some more information in here. So right here, we can go in and add some information. For example, we can say it's due in how many days, is there a discount percentage, if they pay in advance, and so forth. Is it date driven? Again, some of these things I'm going to sort of move through quickly because each individual business is unique and you've got to make some of these decisions. The key point I want to make here is that as you add things to QuickBooks, for the first time you'll be prompted to make some decisions. So keep in mind, I said earlier that you learn by doing. Even though we started with an invoice, almost everything else you do in QuickBooks is going to prompt you to put things in. So the first month you use QuickBooks is probably the longest, but the second month, when you go to invoice the RR Painting Company again, they're already going to be in there, and it's going to be very easy to work with. What I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to click Cancel. And over here where it says Terms, I'm going to type in COD. Okay, now that's already in there, so I'm going to hit the Tab key and I'm going to go down to the item. Now, what is the item we want to sell? And again, keep in mind, you can customize the way this looks. When we go to Item, what we can do at this point is we can type in a new item, a unique item, or something that's already in there. If I click on the drop down, you'll see that there are some different items already in there. But I'm going to put in red widgets, okay? And I'm going to type in red widgets. Okay. QuickBooks did not find red widgets in your list of products and services. Would you like to add it now? Can you see a theme here? It keeps asking me if I want to add it. So I'm going to click Yes. Now, what happens is, once that occurs, a new item box comes up. Now, at this point, again, there are subtle things that I'm going to just go by quickly. Here where it says Type, I'm just going to call it Service for the time being. Now, what is the item number? Widgets, red. I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, what I can also do is I can make this a sub-item of something else. So, for example, I could make widgets, red widgets, a sub-item of widgets. Now, why is that relevant? Well, if you're running reports, which is something you can easily do in QuickBooks, you might want to run a report on widget sales. Because it's a sub-item of widgets, you're going to be able to run a report on your total widget sales, but then you're going to be able to take it to another level and say, okay, what's the breakdown on purple widgets versus red widgets? But overall, you're going to see a summary for total widget sales and then a breakdown for the types of widgets. So when you have items that could be considered sub-items, then I think that's a good idea to do it that way. Now, again, if you don't do this perfectly, you can go in and modify this, so don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. That's probably the best thing you can do with this information. I'm going to come down here where it says Widgets. I'm going to click on this, and now we've made red widgets a sub-item of widgets. Now, we're going to come down here, and if I had hit the Tab key, I would have come down to the description field. I'm going to type in here the world's best red widgets. Now, when we type in red widgets in the future, it will automatically put in the world's best widgets. Now, if we know the rate by hitting the Tab key, let's say the rate is at $1.25 per widget. I'm going to go down to an account. On the account, we're going to choose an account that's an income account. Now, different companies do this differently, and the thing I should mention at this point is when I approach this class, I don't approach it from an accounting point of view. In other words, if you sat down with an accountant and started to work through QuickBooks, your accountant would set this up perfectly based on the way things should be set up from an accountant's point of view. My goal here is not to get it from an accountant's point of view, but my goal here is to get it from a user's point of view. In other words, I want to make this so easy for you to use that you're going to go in and not think twice about starting to use QuickBooks. I'm trying to show it from an instructor's point of view. I think what you can do is once you start getting comfortable with QuickBooks, you go back into it and start working on it from an accountant's point of view, because you can modify this and it doesn't have to be perfect right away, but the goal here is to get you comfortable enough so you start using it on a regular basis. So under account, we're going to call this sales because it's part of sales. I'm going to click OK. Now, look what happens here. Widget, red widgets, and now what's going to occur is it's going to ask us for a quantity. Well, let's say we want to buy 300 of those red widgets. I typed in 300. I'm going to hit the Tab key. I can go past this because it's already been typed in. And under the rate, it's $1.25. And $1.25 times 300 is $375. So it automatically calculates it. Now, we have an invoice. We can do a lot of different things with this invoice at this point. First of all, we can print it. If we want to print it, we could come up here and click on Print. If we don't want to print it, let's say we want to print a batch of them. Down here where it says To Be Printed, we can also check that off so that later on we can print all the invoices we've created today and print them at one time. You can also, and one of the things I love about QuickBooks is you can email invoices. I think there are pros and cons to that. What I do is I have a service in my email that frankly tells me when people get my emails. I can talk about that a little later. But what I do is instead of printing these and mailing them, I email all my invoices. Now that might not be practical for you, but for me it works good because I don't have a high volume of invoices. It's not like I'm creating 20 a day. It's typically maybe 1 or 2 a day, so I can invoice them very easily. Now, what I do is I come up on the toolbar and I click on File and I click on Save as PDF. And I do that because what it allows me to do is save this file as a PDF and then I can email it as an attachment. The reason I use a tool that tells me when people actually receive my email is because I'm going to get a notification that this invoice I sent out as an attachment was received by the person on the other end. Okay? There's a service I use. It's not really a service, it's a tool that I purchased for $19. It's called Message Tag, MSGTAG, Message Tag. And you can go to msgtag.com. They have a free version and they have a more expensive version. But in a nutshell, what it does is it keeps me informed of who's getting my emails. When I email invoices, one of my concerns is that it gets caught by spam filters. And because of that, I want to make sure that it gets to the appropriate person. So this message tag service tells me when this company, RRR Printing or Painting Company, receives the email. So again, I save it as a PDF in a file called QuickBooks Invoices, and then I email it out because that way I'm informed. When you print it and mail it, or if you email it through QuickBooks, you really don't know that. So let's say we're completely done with this invoice for RRR Painting Company and we don't have any other invoices to do. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and click on Save and Close. Now, when I do that, one of the things I want you to realize, or I want to point out because you might not have realized, what happened was when I typed in RRR Painting Company, I didn't put any address in until after the fact. If I had gone in and modified this invoice a little bit differently, it would have disregarded this. But because I put this in the address after the fact, it's saying, hey, you've changed the billing address in terms, because I also put in COD. Would you like to have this new information appear next time? I'm going to click yes, because then what will happen is the next time I go to do an invoice for RRR Painting Company, all that other information will go in as well. What sometimes I'll do is in the address I'll also put attention, Steve Smith or Jane Smith or whatever it might be, so that people can easily find it. So to backtrack for a moment, what we did is we created an invoice, and I'm going to come back down here to where it says Invoices, click on this, and it will take me to a blank invoice. Up here on this toolbar, if I click on Previous, it will take me back to the previous invoice I created, RR Painting Company. If I do it again, to the next one. And what you'll see is through this class I have created a couple different invoices. Now, let's talk about what just occurred when we created an invoice. Just a little bit of an accounting lesson. When you create an invoice, what then occurs is you have created a receivable. In other words, you're waiting to receive money from this company. You've created a receivable. So if you want to run a report to see who owes you money or a receivables report, QuickBooks has all kinds of reports you can use. I'm coming up to the toolbar. I'm going to click on Reports, and I'm going to come down to Customers and Receivables. I'm going to go to Accounts Receivable Aging Summary, and I'm going to click on that. Now, when this opens up, I'm going to maximize it by clicking on this square, and here are my receivables. There's that one from RRR Painting Company that I just created. Now, when you see a report like this, as you move the pointer around and place it on a number, not necessarily the name, but on a number, you just got to mess around with this a little bit, get a sense of how it works, but put the pointer on these items. right there it says 375, and I don't know if you can really see that well, but the little zoom feature is telling me that if I double click on that, it will actually drill down to some more information. I'm going to double click again, and now it actually opens the next invoice, or the invoice in question. So it takes me right to it just by double clicking on it. So when we put this invoice in, to backtrack for a minute, I want you to be aware of the fact that we created a new customer or a job called RRR Painting Company. It remembered all the information. So now if I want to close this invoice, or if I want to create a new invoice, I can come down, or I can click on next. I knew the next invoice was blank, and let's say we got to do another job for RRR. Well, I'm just going to start typing R, and because this is the only item that begins with R, it guesses this is what we want to use. So at this point I'm going to hit the tab, and all of my information is filled in. There's my invoice COD. I'm just going to keep hitting tab again until I get down to item right there. Now this time I'm going to click on the drop down, and I'm going to just choose something else. I'm going to choose dimmer switch, and let's say the quantity is 3, and they're $12.59 each. As you notice over here where it says rate, I'm going to hit the tab key, and now I've gone right here, install dimmer switch. Now if I want to add more stuff to this description, I can do it. Per Joanne in accounting, or in a department. So if anyone gets this invoice and they're like, wait a minute, who said I could install a dimmer switch? You can put a great deal of detail here. If you go further, you go many lines, it will just go straight down. So you can put in all kinds of information here. My experience has been it's better to be a little more detailed, so when a person gets the invoice, there's no question about what it's for. Anytime you can avoid getting a phone call or taking any of your time just to discuss an invoice, all that much better. So if we want to create this invoice, now I'm going to come down and click on Save and Close. If we want to do a new invoice, Save and New, and that would take us to a blank invoice. Let me do that. Let me do Save and New, and you'll see we go right to a blank invoice. Now, keep in mind, before we got here, I had you run a report on aging, an aging report. Over here on the left-hand side are all the windows we have open. In other words, there are things hiding under this invoice. To get to them, we can come over here on the left, and we can click on AR Aging Summary. And now I want you to notice that our original invoice for RR Painting Company, the original receivable, has gone up. If we double-click on this number, now there's 2 invoices. Let's say we want to see this invoice, double-click on it again, and it opens it up. So when you enter stuff into QuickBooks the first time, you'll be prompted to make some decisions about it. So if you're not ready to sit down and make some decisions like that, you should sit down and write some things down on a piece of paper. For example, if you sell things or you have services, determine in advance what you're going to call those things. If you have interior painting, exterior painting, commercial painting, residential painting, decide what those items are, so when you go down to start entering things in QuickBooks, it's very easy to make those decisions and get all the information in there. When we come back in the next part of our QuickBooks training, the next session, we will get into more detail about entering information in some different areas of QuickBooks. Thank you very much.